Hey everyone, it's Paul. Bet you didn't know that polymer clay has more in common with this PVC pipe than it does with this hunk of dirt. It's true. Polymer clays are actually a PVC derivative. What does that mean? Well, unlike earthen-based clays, which are clay and water, polymer clays are a PVC powder mixed with a polymer agent. And instead of working out all of the moisture at very high temperatures like we do with earthenware, polymer clays are actually undergoing a chemical process. Much like epoxy, like a two-part epoxy, or a resin where you mix an A and a B, stir them together and wait for them to turn solid, polymer clays are undergoing the same thing, just really slowly. Now, this allows it to be shelf stable and allows it to be a clay that we can actually work with, to be malleable. When we put it into the oven, we're actually hastening the curing process. We're not cooking it, we're curing it. And that's what allows it to become a solid. The interesting thing is that curing process is actually happening from the moment it's created until the moment it is baked, and any time in between that, even at room temperature. So when we put polymer clay into the oven at 275 degrees Fahrenheit or 130 degrees Celsius, what we're doing is we're quickening that curing process. We're telling it is time to complete that step. But the neat thing is we don't actually need to cook it at that high of a temperature. And if you have a home oven that you're unsure of whether or not your temperatures remain stable, or if you're concerned about contaminants into your food, I'd really recommend you actually cook it about 10 degrees less than what is recommended on the packaging. This will not affect the clay curing process at all. That's the neat thing about it, is even at room temperature over a long period of time, that clay is still going to cure. That's why sometimes you might have harder clay that's more brittle and when you get it out of the packaging. That's because it's undergone the curing process just over time. When you put it into an oven at a lesser temperature, it will still get to its cured process. It might just take a little bit longer. This is what also allows us to do something called the multi-bake technique, where you can take previously cooked clay, add more clay to it, and then cook it again and again and again without hurting the other clay that's there. What we need to be aware of is temperatures when we are finishing that cure process. Too hot of heat, temperatures above 275 can actually lead to scorching. And that's why 275 is the recommended temperature, because above that, we're going to end up burning the polymer. And the downside of that is when you burn PVC, it particulates inside your oven. That basically means it lets off an ash, an unseen ash that floats out into the oven itself. And as the oven temperatures cool down, that bit of particulate is actually attracted to the heating elements, and so it will move down and attach themselves to the heating elements. And every time you turn on the oven, it pushes those chemicals back out into the oven. And if you use your oven to cook food as well as your polymer clays and you burn it, what can happen is you can release those toxins into your food. And so that's why they recommend that you only cook it at 275 degrees and not above. Do not burn your clay. Now, if you cook it at less than that, you run a much less risk of ever burning your polymer clay, and it'll still get through the cure process. So that's a little something I bet you didn't know about polymer clay. Remember to work smarter, not harder, and hopefully you guys learned something today. I know I did.